Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast brought to you by the Draft Professors. Today I'm joined by Draft Professors Durst and Peter Quinn, and we're going to be diving into some cornerbacks here in a few minutes. Guys, we've had like a week off, right? Because Thanksgiving was last week. So, Peter, it's good to see you after a 2-week break. How are things going in Scotland?
Yeah, good, thanks. Obviously, no Thanksgiving for us to celebrate here, but I've got family over in the States who had a fantastic time, and so that was lovely to kind of hear from them that they enjoyed it. I was in the States myself last year for Thanksgiving, and I absolutely loved it. Kind of made a full week of it with family and stuff. It was fantastic. So nice memories of that again this year.
Yeah, I guess, and that's probably a discussion for like another podcast, another time. But like Thanksgiving is such an American thing. It's American and Canadian. And then I don't know what other cultures do.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we don't have too much. We had kind of St. Andrew's Day is a little bit of a celebration here in Scotland. So we had that on the 30th of November. So that was, it's definitely not Thanksgiving, but it was a nice celebration over here as well.
Cool. And Durst, how is your board coming along at this point of the college football season?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, I'm doing. I'm going kind of off track a little bit. I got a 2028 board. I got a 2027 board. So kind of keeping track of who may or may not declare this year, and got a little bit of a hankering for the freshmen, trying to figure out who's who in that class. So it's been fun, but I'm juggling maybe 800 players between freshmen all the way up to our 6-year seniors.
Cool. Well, we have a set of corners that we're going to be talking about today. Jamarcus Nicholson from USC, Brent Austin from California, Thaddeus Dixon from North Carolina, Preston Hodge from Colorado, Daylen Everette from Georgia, Jermod McCoy from Tennessee, and then Mansoor Delane from LSU. And if this is the first time you've caught a podcast with us, Durst, Peter, and Clint have been going through approximately 8 corners a week. I believe this is the 7th podcast. So ultimately, they've gone through somewhere between, 48 and 54 corners. So the first one up is Jamarcus Nicholson. Durst, what did you see from the USC corner?
Yeah, I was actually trying to scout a different USC corner, and he's the one that this guy ended up kind of standing out. So Jamarcus Nicholson, as you have listed here, 6'3", 200. That's what I have for him as well. And he is a 6-year senior. So he spent the very beginning of his career, 2020 to 2021, at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. And of course, as has been the trend, a lot of people that spent a year at community colleges were granted an extra year of eligibility, the Pavia rule, so to speak. But then he transferred to Mississippi State, and he was there from 2022 to 2023, although I really didn't remember him at Mississippi State. But he does have really good size and length. He seems to really like playing press man, and I feel like he's got some really well-timed punches within that 5-yard zone. I think he competes at the catch point, and he can swat balls away if he stays within striking distance. Now, he doesn't always stay within striking distance, so he's got a good reach, but he's got to be kind of in their hip pocket to really be able to get that ball out. My concerns is he's an older 6-year prospect, and I feel like he occasionally bails way past the first down markers. So the thing is, when it's a 6-year senior, I kind of like to see in my notes he's like a coach on the field. But instead, I'm seeing a bunch of he's bailing way past the first down markers on the 3rd and 7 and stuff. So I don't really love that part of him. So I have him as sort of a friend's draftable grade. Once I get the board stacked, we'll try to figure out if he ends up making the cut or not. And I watched a few games of him, Notre Dame, Michigan, and Nebraska. I still want to watch the USC UCLA game from this past weekend, so it's in my queue. I still haven't got to that one. But Peter, what did you think of Nicholson?
Yeah, so I had quite a lot of the same stuff. I think I wasn't maybe quite as high on him. I thought that his lateral movement is maybe not the best out of the people that we've looked at. He's got good length, obviously. So, being 6'3", he's got long arms, uses them pretty well at times. Had a really good pick against Georgia Southern, tracked the ball well in field and made a good play on it. I agree. I think he often starts very deep at the line of scrimmage, kind of backpedals very quickly, and then if the receiver looks like they're getting past him, he can get quite grabby. I think which sure, it's fine if you're impressed right up at the line of scrimmage. If you're starting 10 yards deep, you're going to get called for that a lot, I think, certainly at the next level. And again, I do have concerns as well about his age profile. I think he's a freshman quarterback as well at Mississippi Gulf Coast, and he's, as mentioned, kind of taking the extra years, same as Diego Pavia. He was also, again, I might be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure he was a junior technically in 2022, just like Christian Gonzalez. And again, don't get me wrong, not every cornerback needs to be at that play level. However, that's a lot of experience that kind of Gonzalez has got stepping up to the next level for two players who at one stage were kind of comparable levels in their career and their experience. So I thought that I watched this game against Notre Dame, and it was a bit of a tough game to choose because he was virtually untested. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love got 315 yards from 37 carries against them. They barely had to pass the ball at all. But yeah, I think that he's a player that potentially he falls into this mix of, if teams like his particular style, his athletic profile potentially, then he could go day 3. I think that there's a lot of guys who will be on that fringe. Will they be drafted kind of around 6, 7? Will they not be drafted? And it will just come down to team needs, team profiles, what they're looking for in their cornerbacks, I think. How about you, Clint?
Yeah, I won't take too long. Y'all have pretty much already covered it. I would say I think he is an undrafted guy. I think, I can't remember the name in the comment, but I like that point. Somebody said a possible move to safety. I could see somebody viewing that. Anthony, okay, yeah. I thought that as well, to see him as somebody that going into this year had about a season's worth of starts across his time at Mississippi State and then at Southern Cal. I mean, statistically, he's got some good numbers: 8 pass breakups, 4 tackles for loss, 74 tackles. And I mean, you look at like, not even talking about film, just looking at a photo of the guy, like the photo up on the screen. You look at his arms and legs, and you're like, man, this kid's long to be 6, even for 6'3", So I think there's that kind of stuff to work with. But I think you're looking at more of somebody undrafted guy, tries to make a team, be a special teams player kind of thing. And I did agree. I really like Durst's point about it being a 6th year. And it's kind of by now, at that age, when I look at prospects going into the draft, it's not to say guys don't continue to develop as they get into the league, but it's a little teetering closer to what you see is what you get. I just kind of think that's what this guy is. That's what he's going to be. So that's all I had to add.
Yep. And I'll add, this is the wrong year for a corner to switch to safety. I believe like the average is between 17 and 20 safeties get drafted. And I think the safety group, they evaluated 33 and there weren't 8 undrafted or return to school grades. Right, like the safety group this year of just true safeties is stacked. But Brent Austin from California. So, Peter, what did you see on Brent Austin from California?
Yeah, so he was at JMU 2022 and 23, and then South Florida 24. I think he's got very accurate hands at the catch point. It really makes pass breakups at an elite rate. The last couple of weeks he's been targeted pretty often. The first 8 games of the season, he was targeted 22 times in total, and then 17 in the following 2. I think that's maybe a factor in as well. Hezekiah Masses being on the team as well. I think that at times he can get a little bit flat-footed in coverage, and he can kind of trail in coverage a little bit, but then does close well to make a play on the ball when he needs to. Downfield, he can struggle to match receivers at times, I watched the Virginia game in particular. Had several excellent plays that kind of make you sit up and pay attention. He did also give up some easy yards though, just from being a little bit soft at the line. I think that his plan often is kind of get that initial push, back pedal, and he's got very fast feet for it, which is helpful. Keep the wide receiver in front of him, keep his eyes down at the quarterback, and then close once he sees the ball in the air. He knows his game, and I think that again, it's another guy who falls into the category of, if that's what a team decides that that they're looking for, then he's a guy who could go kind of pretty early day 3 for me. I don't know if I'm higher than that, but I think even his tackling as well, it can be a bit hit or miss, kind of like all the DBs in the Cal DB room there. But yeah, I think that he's a guy that could well go kind of early day 3 because of his playmaking production this year, kind of getting hands on the ball at the catch point, and he's a massive attribute in that sense to any team.
And so, Peter, you had draftable day 3 on Brent Austin.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Clint, what did you have on Brent Austin from California? We lost. Oh, there he is. Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if your screen locked.
Big you out there. For starters, I'm always fascinated by somebody that's a 0-star recruit coming in. Just kind of adding to his background. Big track and field guy in high school. JMU, it's like, man, I keep seeing that over and over, particularly with the Signetti era, in terms of talent that they've gotten really developed, whether it be there or schools they moved on to. I liked what was already said by Peter, just in terms of him being a day 3 guy, because some of that, play on the ball. I agree with that as well. And I think he's somebody that it'll be even, and this is kind of applies to everybody, Captain Obvious here, but we're sitting here the first few days of December as we see more and more return to school declarations. The sports just, to your point earlier, Jimmy talked about, oh man, this is not the year to need a safety. We had this many. It's like, even just a little bit, just to watch that board shrink. I mean, on average, in terms of corners, we see 36?
33. Yeah, between 33 and 36. Yep.
Yeah, I got 32 right here. So we're in the ballpark either way in terms of guys that go. So, I mean, I agree. I think he's somebody that can flirt with day 3. And, I've been somebody that I've probably liked Ezekiel Mass as a hair more than the consensus. So that really kind of opened me up to seeing Austin more when I was watching him. Just like with anybody with his size, 180, he's not going to be dominatingly strong in terms of play strength. But, kind of makes up for that with his play on the ball ability. So read the comment here. I mean, yeah, I think with his body habitus, that's pretty well put in terms of where he's going to be pigeonholed in a slot role.
Yep. And we're going to be covering a couple more, at least one other slot corner tonight, because we have Preston Hodge coming up, I believe, 2 players from now. Okay. Clint, you want to tell us about Thaddeus Dixon?
Yeah, Dixon is somebody, it's just kind of random, but I really had been talking him up in summer scouting and then into the early part of this year as somebody that I thought was a real fit for the Packers as more of a day 2, day 3 guy, and kind of what they look for, particularly his body habitus. I mean, he's very well proportionally built, like you see in terms of his numbers, 2'6", 185. He's another one I said I get fascinated by. 0-star recruit, Long Beach City Community College, played there 2 years, had 19 starts, transferred to Washington as 3-star JUCO. 1 start in 2023, then had that breakthrough in 2024, 12 starts, and then the move to North Carolina, getting talked into that with the whole Bill Belichick era. Wingspan is engulfing. I think he matches up incredibly well, particularly with some of these more modern, smaller built receivers. Very good combating that. I thought he had a really good feel for zone. Not taking his eyes off the quarterback. He handled crossing routes over the middle very well in transition. I thought he had good stick to him. good ability to turn his head, locate the ball. And speaking on that size, I thought he used it pretty well in the run game, triggering downhill. So Dixon's somebody I liked. I mean, I think I roughly had him right here as a midday 3. I think he's a guy, in my opinion, probably flirting with like a 5th round kind of thing. I said the Packers point earlier, like, yeah, he went to the Packers in round 5. I'm going to be saying called that shit. Yeah. I think for what his selling points are, his size and his length, he uses them to his advantage. His speed's not going to really impress you a lot. And with that, he's just going to have to work to try and hang with some of these shiftier receivers. Like I said earlier about some of these more small receivers he matches well, but off the line of scrimmage, it's just going to be, that's kind of the 2 negatives I think that kind of limit him to. He's going to be a day 3 guy in a stat class.
Durs, what do you have on Thaddeus Dixon from North Carolina?
Yeah, I'm definitely a little bit higher on Thaddeus Dixon. So he was talked up quite a bit by Trevor Sikkema during the summer. He had a lot of things to say about him, and I wasn't really that aware of him at that point. So I kind of saved him a little bit as this season went on. But yeah, so I mean, I have him a little bit heavier also. I think this came from Dane Brugler's, but this was a 6'0" and 1/4, 6 foot and 1/4 inch and 195 pounds. So that's a little bit more, a little bit more muscle on him than what your screen there shows. But I think he thrives on an island and press man coverage. So of course, Belichick has not had a great season, as a coach of a UNC, but I do think he knows defensive back play really well. And so I think he's got both him and Marcus Allen kind of out on the island quite a bit and doing some press man things. I think it's going to help Thaddeus when he, tries to adjust to the NFL level. I feel like he's got transitional quickness to stay on the hips of receivers and a disruptive reach to forcing completions. But he's got a lack of ball production. And I think the lack of ball production and the reception percentage surrendered is a little bit misleading. I think he's had some really difficult assignments. So one of the things that Trevor Sikkema pointed out is he had a lot of a lot of shadow coverage last year when he was at Washington. And so I went through some of that film and saw him against Ted McMillan and Kyle Williams. And they had some good plays against both those guys. And then this year, the very first game of the year, he was really like locking down Eric McAllister. So Eric McAllister might be more of a day 3 wide receiver, but he is a guy that I'm pretty impressed by. And he really kind of put the clamps on him in game 1. He also did a pretty good job on Antonio Williams, which is probably the first time I really started seeing him like fall into the slot a little bit. So he was doing a lot of shadowing, but inclusive of if he's out on the boundary, he's going to fall on there. If he's going to go across the formation, he's going to fall on there. So I'm pretty impressed by the difficulty of assignments that he had, and I thought he looked worlds better than his teammate Marcus Allen. Now I do have some concerns. I do think he's probably not the most scheme diverse or positional diverse player. I don't love him nearly as much in the slot as I do on the boundary, and I don't think he's going to be as good as a zone corner as he is going to be more of a press man. So more of a cover corner who's best on the boundary. And this is the other thing is he actually got more slot reps the last 3 games than he did all of 2024. So I was saying I don't think he looks as comfortable on the slot. He also isn't as experienced in the slot. So that still could be something that develops with more reps there. Now, probably worth mentioning also, he had 6 missed games with minor injuries in 2025, though. So he's missed like close to half the season or so. So that's why I really wanted to start going back and looking at some of the 2024 tape. So I have him as a kind of fringe top 100 guy. So I'm definitely a little bit higher than Clint is, with a comp of Paulson Adebo from the former Stanford. I think he's now with the Saints. He's with the Giants now. He got drafted by the Saints. He's with the Giants now. But Peter, what do you have on Thaddeus Dixon?
Yeah, so I think I probably fall somewhere kind of pretty close to you guys, maybe in between. I think I've got him as a kind of early day 3, maybe pushing to day 2. But I think, as you mentioned, his injuries this year might give teams a little bit of pause. And kind of that combines with, we're clearly unsure about his exact weight as well in terms of play size and kind of taking the repeated hits that that will be required in the NFL. I really liked his tape last year against Washington State. Watched that game, was really impressed. I thought this year, again, as Durst mentioned, often Thaddeus Dixon and Marcus Allen are kind of left on an island at kind of opposite sides of the field, left with pretty tough assignments. And I think the TCU game this year really showed up kind of that Dixon's maybe a few steps ahead in his development as a corner, because I think that he dealt with Eric McAllister really well for the most part, made some really good plays. I like the way that he's able to kind of keep his eyes downfield at the quarterback while kind of keeping the receiver in sight as well. He can blanket receivers using his really good lateral movement, good hand use as well. He can get a little grabby at times downfield, which is an issue. I think that he's a really good man corner, and I agree that I feel like after watching those matches, I haven't seen him in zone much. I don't really have too much of an impression of that. I think that when he's initially beaten in man coverage, he can start to struggle to recover. I also worry a little bit, again, about that physicality. I think for him to, he'll have a highlight reel of really good big hits throughout his time at college that will, do the rounds on social media, look really good. However, I think a lot of the time as well, though, when he's off, as soon as he's off balance, he can look a little weak in terms of trying to find the ball in the run game. And even in that initial kind of press man coverage at the line of scrimmage, I think that he can line up runners and lay that big hit, but he's very inconsistent and quite inaccurate in his tackle technique, perhaps due to just wanting to throw everything into it. But I think that at times he could do with kind of taking track of his surroundings and kind of working on what to do there. I think there's a guy that potentially could be pushing in towards the start of round 4. I can't see him quite reaching into day 2, but he'll not be far off, I think.
Okay, so a couple comments in the chat. So let's take the second comment first. So do we have confirmed measurements on Dixon? I pulled those off of PFF. 6'1", 185, I believe, is what PFF had him.
So one of the comments was saying that the teams end up being a little bit generous, but teams do, or NFL teams do go through during the spring, and so when you look at Dane Bruder's measurements, those tend to be pretty accurate. Now, obviously, people can gain weight and lose weight, especially offensive linemen, but it was Bruder's information where he had him listed as 195 during his summer profile of the corners.
Okay, thanks, Durst. And then second comment, Durst, do you think Dixon is going to be better in the pros than he was in college?
I mean, I get what they're saying. It's always hard to, think of about a person who could be like not that good of a college player, but also become a good NFL player. But and I realize that saying that he's playing for Bill Belichick may not sound like a ringing endorsement considering how bad that team is. But I do think there's something to that. He's playing for a coach that at least I feel like defensive play and defensive back play was kind of his main, how he got to the status of where he is. And so I think there's a chance. He's been trained to do kind of a shadow coverage press man. I don't think he shadowed people as much at UNC as he did in Washington, but I saw glimpses of that sometimes. So I do think that the team really trusts him in that role. So I when I compare him to Paulson and Debo and say he could be a potential first round or a top 100 pick, that's kind of where I'm going with that. I realize that his play this year doesn't necessarily scream top 100. So I would say I would kind of agree with the comment, but barely.
Okay, Preston Hodge from Colorado. So he wasn't on any of the summer scouting lists. The other cornerback podcast with Ian Cummings and JT Olson loved Hodge. But Peter, what do you have on Preston Hodge, the Colorado cornerback?
Yeah, so he stood out a little bit when I was looking at McKinney earlier, doing some scouting on him. So again, he's another, he played Navarro College in 2021, then Liberty 22-23. He spent some time at safety, and I think his instincts in terms of hunting down screens and short passes are really good. if he can manage to avoid the blockers coming his way, and he's got the movement skills to be able to do that, then I think he can manage to blow up plays with pretty good regularity, to be honest. The issue is for him, sometimes he struggles to read the overall play, runners, blocks, angles. I think he's got really good back pedal, kind of breaks well with receivers left and right, and uses his arms well at the catch point. He's not necessarily the longest corner in the world, but I think that he uses every inch of it in order to break passes up. He brings a really good intensity every snap. In terms of some of his struggles, I think that he can get a little grabby downfield sometimes. And as mentioned, I think in terms of reading the play as a whole, he reads the passes well when the ball's in the air, and then can manage to break in the ball and kind of compete for it. But I think overall, he can kind of get washed out of plays a little too easily for a guy who's going to be right in the heart of the action as a slot corner. He can often latch on. So if it's offensive linemen that are blocking him out of plays, that's going to happen. He's not that's not a size matchup that's ever going to work. However, even when it's kind of tight ends, sometimes even receivers, he's getting redirected and he's letting guys get right into his chest, kind of direct him out of the play, and that's something that I think will be an issue in the NFL, where you're going to have some wide receivers and tight ends who are excellent blockers. I think that he's a bit like again, it's not necessarily a full-on comp, but I thought Jabril Rolls, when I was watching him, kind of similar stuff, that when he gets his head down and kind of reads the play correctly, he can make really good plays. So his good plays are really good, and I think his bad plays leave something to be desired a little bit. I think that he's going to. I think he's definitely draftable. I think that he's probably mid day 3 for a team that are looking for a slot cornerback that they can work on for a couple of years potentially before he fully steps in to contribute. I've seen also with him kind of mentioned that he could look to go back to safety. I don't think that's necessarily something that's going to help. I don't think that his main issue is with keeping the play in front of him like that. I think that working as a slot corner is his long-term future, but I think that there's a little bit of play recognition that needs to be gradually built up there for him to kind of realize his potential in the NFL.
Okay, Clint, what did you see with Preston Hodge?
Yeah, I think there's no question he's a slot, versus a discussion moving into safety or boundary. He's a slot all the way, and that's why a team's going to take him on day 3. He's getting drafted. I also don't think that's much of a conversation. But he's going to be coming in, a guy that's going to be teetering on 30 starts in the slot collegiately. You can look at the photo right there. He's got a really good compact build to him. This isn't one of these slot corners we talk about like we wish he had more ass in the jeans. Like, this kid's pretty compact. I thought the movement skills were good. Thought his feel for zone was good awareness, and his location and ability to make plays on the ball. That's like I have statistically last year. The guy had 4 picks. Thought that was strong. His length's going to be average, but with him being a slot, it's going to be fine. I think, kind of like Peter said, as far as somebody's going to take him on day 3 with the understanding that he's not going to come in and be playing starting minutes in the first year or so. Like, he's a developmental that some DB coach is going to get excited about. I'd really like to see, with that, compact build, that 200 pounds, just continue to improve his play strength and kind of form tackling and more productive tackling with a lower missed tackle rate for a guy that is not afraid of contact and goes and seeks it. So this isn't a spot where a DB coach has got to get a guy. It's kind of like when you're teaching Little League baseball and you got a kid that's afraid of the ball. It's like he's not afraid of contact. It's just a matter of maybe getting him to be a little bit better form tackler. But developmental slot, he's going day 3. He's getting drafted 100%.
Durst, what did you think of Preston Hodge?
So he is one of the guys that Brugger did not have. Brugger published 25 basically verified height and weights for senior corners, and Hodge was not on the list. So you have him listed as 6 foot 200, and I would agree with the other person who says a lot of times colleges exaggerate. I think this guy, I'm guessing this guy's closer to 5'10" than 6 foot in my opinion. Now, so I forget this was brought up, but he's also another guy that got the NCAA waiver, granting him some additional eligibility because he did play his first year, 2021, in Navarro Community College, and then 2 years at Liberty 2022 and 2023. So I know Clint was mentioned. I think he said 30 games that he had as a starter, and this basically translates to he's got over 1,600 snaps in the slot. So my strengths is basically he's an experienced and refined slot defender who can play press from an inside alignment and create a lot of resistance at the start of a route. He will quickly mow down screens. Talking about the physicality, certainly not afraid of of contact. I feel like he's an enforcer in the run game. He has got some reps where he's able to stalemate a couple of offensive linemen. Now again, he's not knocking down offensive linemen, but he's able to basically keep from getting mowed over by offensive linemen when he's up in the open field there. He's got some really nice, well-timed pass breaks up on film. And why I want to kind of say it is well-timed is I don't think he's got a lot of length. And even on some of these reps, and I've put a couple of these on Twitter, but there's some like where he's got this like reach and you can see him stretched out and he just kind of barely got his finger on it. It's well-timed, but I think you can kind of tell even by his good reps, it's like, whoa, like if this was a slightly better pass and a little bit higher, that probably is going to be out of his reach. So I do think he's a slot-only corner, again, closer to probably 5'10" than 6 foot tall. And one of the things is, even though he's certainly not afraid of contact and is pretty willing, he's got an over 20% missed tackle rate in each of his 2 seasons at Colorado. I don't think it was quite as bad at Liberty, but a different level of competition there, obviously. I do think he lacks a top gear and recovery speed. I think that showed up a couple of times. And I forget if it's Clint or Peter that brought up maybe like the possible like safety, or you didn't think he would be good at safety. But there was one particular snap where he was very deep at safety against Arizona State. And he took a really poor angle when he was coming up, after playing deep middle. So one of the films I want to study more is actually that Arizona State game, because I'm pretty sure that what's the corner number 8 again? McKinney. I was pretty sure that he missed that game, and so I want to see how many reps that that Hodge might have had against Jordan Tyson, because I know Jordan Tyson plays a lot in the slot. So again, I watched just clips of the Arizona State game, but I want to try to get that whole game and see if we got a little bit of Tyson against Hodge action there. But I do have him as a round 5 guys. So I think you said that. Did you say Ian Cummings had him as a top 100, or that?
No, they
just liked him a lot.
The other podcast said they thought Hodge was the second best slot corner in the draft.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm going to be that high in terms of even my slot rankings and stuff, but again, like Clint said, definitely draftable. But I don't think it's likely he's top 100, and at least not in my rankings.
Yeah, and I would be curious if we have data on the types of corners drafted day 2 versus day 3, meaning that can we think back to a player that we said their scouting report is slot only, and they went day 1 or 2? I mean, some people said that about Trent McDuffie when he came out, and he ended up going in the first round. And now he's actually playing boundary corner for Kansas City. But I would be curious. I like the day 3 slot corner. That's a good way to describe Hodge and the position as a whole. Okay, I think we're going to kick the podcast up a notch. We have Daylen Everette from Georgia here, and Clint, being a Bulldog, is this one of your guys?
Yeah, I'd started off by saying Everette was one from the start that was interesting for us, considering Kirby stole him from – he was committed to Dabo and Clemson forever. I mean, this was like a night before signing day. Out of nowhere, we just pulled the guy. So he always kind of felt like a steal in that aspect because, I mean, he was a 5-star IMG guy. I mean, that was a prime flip. But, I think the other starting point that's just so cool for him, I mean, and, who knows how far Georgia goes in this, but knowing we have the SEC championship and then assuming a first game at least in the college football playoff, it's like in terms of just games played, he's going to have 60-plus games he's appeared in. In terms of starts, he's going to have between 40 and 45 starts in the SEC. So tons of tape, tons of progression, tons of experience. And add to that his IMG background as the premier high school football program in the country. It's like his pedigree in that aspect is incredible. On the inverse of us kind of debating the size of the previous corner, he's every bit of 6'1", 190, very well built, got quick feet, good burst, and he's got play strength to him. I think best at the line of scrimmage versus being an off-man kind of guy. He's been frustrating sometimes when he kind of gets off and we play a little more conservative with him. You can dink and dunk him a little bit. Like him more as a press corner using his length because he's kind of a tough ass. I mean, he's fiery. He'll blitz. And he can hang at the line of scrimmage. And, kind of going back to some of the comment about, he's not as good with that space and that cushion between he and the receiver. Speed's okay. He's not going to be a guy that's going to go blow up Indianapolis. I don't think. Yeah, and last note I had was just, willing tackler. Would like to see what is close to about a 20% missed tackle rate. Like to see that decrease a little bit, particularly with his size. But, all in all, to wrap it up, I'd say all those things. I think if he'd have come into this year and had a stronger year in terms of kind of sticking more to his press ability, not having some of that cushion between he and receivers to dink and dunk him, had a little lower missed tackle rate, I think he's somebody that could have flirted with round 2. I don't think that now. I think he's looking at more like a third-round guy with a lot of upside. But he's kind of fishing right there inside that top 100 for me, and I think consensus on team boards.
Okay, love it. Daylen Everette from Georgia.
Yeah, Clint, let me ask you one question real quick. So I know when we were talking about A.J. Harris, I think you were saying that so basically A.J. Harris was behind Everette and he was behind Kwame Lassiter, is that his name? And so that's kind of why A.J. Harris transferred to Penn State, is he couldn't really beat out either of those two guys, right?
Yes.
That's kind of how it worked out. Yeah.
Everette, like I said, in terms of the games he participated, he didn't have a start as a freshman, but I mean, it was very clear heading into that offseason that he was getting the ticket. I think that Harris was a guy that Kirby really liked, but to your phrasing, he couldn't shake Everette. And, it's really been interesting to watch them progressing here draft-wise, because I think most would have Harris probably a tick higher on their board. But I didn't feel passionate one way or the other, really. I hated to see Harris go. I liked him when he was in Athens. But that almost felt like one in this era that we're in that you was going to lose one of those guys. One of those guys was probably going to transfer. And it was kind of a pick your poison there. But, no, you got that correct. And he damn sure wasn't playing over Kamari Lassiter, who's balling his ass off in Houston.
Yeah.
And was Kirby's dude. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I have him, and this kind of gets in a little bit to what Clint was talking about in terms of his pedigree at IMG in Georgia, but I have him as a pro-ready, scheme versatile boundary corner with good length, size, speed, and change of direction. Should meet all NFL teams' guardrails. So when it comes to if there's a certain 40 time you have to get, or we're not drafting you, I think he's gonna hit that number. If there's a certain arm length, certain height, certain weight, I think he's gonna hit that number. So I don't think don't think he's going to be off any team's boards, for anything from like, and you correct me if I'm wrong in terms of character and things like that, but I think he's going to be on all 32 teams' boards. He can defeat blocks as a run defender. He started, I think, every game in 2023 as a true sophomore, and he started to make some big plays and big moments in 2024. So some of the Texas, he played Texas twice that year, and there was some up and down film, is the way I would say, in 2024. But then I thought it started to stabilize in 2025. I thought there was like less peaks and valleys. Now I think I've seen some plays where he's been an effective blitzer, and I think he surprised a lot of people by returning for his senior season. But I do think it helped him. No weaknesses. I mean, again, his plays begin to stabilize, but I would say he's still a somewhat inconsistent player who gets turned around coverage, not quite as sticky in coverage as you would like. In a 3-year starter, and difficulty turning and locating the ball is probably my biggest concern with him. I think recovery speed is adequate, but not like elite, not ideal. And then here's something I'm kind of interested in whether or not how you guys all feel about this. But he spent 2 seasons at IMG, basically the #1 ranked high school and in the country. And so many people come in and only spend their senior season there, but he actually spent 2 seasons at IMG before going to Georgia. He's been in Georgia for 4 years, so he's basically had 6 years of high level development. Kirby Smart, one of the best defensive minds in all of football, not just college. And so I think he may be just close to his ceiling. So I have him as a eventual starter, a top 75 grade, which I think is kind of what Clint was saying. I used to think 2nd round, probably 3rd round now. And then I have a couple of comps. Jalen Johnson and Rocky Sin are 2 guys I thought have similar play styles, body style, size, that type of thing. But Peter, what do you think of Daylen Everette? And does anybody want to chime in on the whole 6 years of development? Do you think that lowers his ceiling? Do we think he's already kind of reached his peak?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start off with that. I think it doesn't necessarily lower his ceiling. I think it's just that, as you mentioned, he's currently closer to it than a lot of these other prospects are. I think it definitely raises his floor. Kind of working with different high-level coaches, it means that before he sets foot in an NFL locker room, he's been coached well. He's kind of played in a variety of schemes in a variety of different ways. He's quite a versatile player, and I think that he's someone, as we mentioned, 3rd-year starter. My slight worries are that at times it looks like his concentration can kind of vary in the run game. He's not necessarily an every down guy at times. I think that sometimes he can get a little wrong-footed or overcommit at times. However, I think in his coverage deep downfield is excellent. I agree that he's better for me in press man than he is kind of off coverage. I think that at times the deeper he plays, this kind of softer he is in coverage, that he can give up plenty of plays in the kind of 5 to 10 yard range. But definitely for me, my main impression is the fact that he's shown signs of improvement since I went through last year. There was a few corners that I kind of went properly deep dive into, and at that point I had Damani Jackson, kind of quite a bit ahead of Daylen Everette as a prospect. Now I'd have that flipped, definitely. I think that it's promising that it seems like he's taken fairly small strides each year, but he's taking strides forward, kind of eliminating some of these bad plays that had held him back before. I agree that I don't think he's necessarily got the elite speeds that's going to make you stand up and take notice, but I think that for the most part he's kind of a solid player. He knows what his role is in the team, and I think that if you can get him in an NFL building, kind of surround him with, again, new coaches who can kind of add to what he's already picked up over his vast experience so far. I think that he's a guy that will be a definite contributor at the next level. I'm slightly lower on him in terms of draft stock. I have him in probably that maybe late day 2, early day 3 sort of range. And yeah, I think it's something that will definitely contribute at the next level because of that experience.
I would just add quickly too, I think, this sounds simple, but Everett's somebody that I feel like I've never heard the guy speak. I don't think I've ever seen an interview with the dude. I don't think I've ever heard like in terms of his experience, in terms of his, IMG Georgia, straight business, who he's played for, who he's played with, different schemes, et cetera, et cetera. It's like he's one of the more what's the word I'm looking for? Like foolproof guys in this class in terms of he could go to any of the 32 teams and find a spot and find people that like him, and he's going to be no headache, and he's all business, and he knows how to be for a guy that's a rookie, he's going to be as close as you get to already knowing how to be a pro. So he's going to be a really safe pick for somebody, I think, in the third round that's just like, man, we need a corner 3 that we think we can develop to a corner 2, and this is a good bet to take on a good guy.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like, basically, I think my first words or something in my scouting report was pro ready.
Yeah, and ironically, if we're talking top 75 to early day 3, that's actually in some ways the same tier. Because, well, what if he is your 75th guy, but on the board, but you chose to draft player 74? He might be the best player you have on your board when you're looking at round 4. So I think that there's always that tier of cornerbacks that is like a round 3-4 tier that when you need a corner, if you didn't get the guy you wanted in round 3, you're going to make sure that you come away with your first pick of day 3 to make sure that the most important, well, I shouldn't say most important. Cornerback is the most often injured position on the team. So generally speaking, every NFL team has to go through 4 corners just to make it through the season. So you want to make sure that cupboard is full. And you're going to make sure you do that sometime in round 3 or 4. So, okay, big finish here. We got 2 players. Jermod McCoy of Tennessee was the consensus corner 1 coming out of the summer. We did a cornerback big board show. All 4 people had McCoy as corner 1, even though he was injured. Has McCoy played? I know that he was practicing. Has McCoy played yet this year?
No.
So what you hear is going to be probably the same thing you heard in summer scouting. But now as the season has ended, we have to be able to talk about what his draft stock is. So, Peter, I'm going to let you start Jermod McCoy. Tell us how you, let's say, stack him on your board even when he hasn't played this year.
Yeah, so obviously a fantastic talent, as shown by the fact that he seems to be staying in many people's round 1 picture, despite not playing this year. And we know, obviously even just last season, the impact that Will Johnson's stock had when he was injured for a long time, and there are concerns, obviously, about the recovery, which is understandable. So, obviously, he was a guy at Oregon State in 2023, and yeah, it's if he's still staying in that round 1 conversation at the moment, I think that there's no reason for him to wait to declare at this stage. I don't think he's going to improve his draft stock over time at this rate. So kind of get yourself in an NFL room and kind of and listen in. Kind of gives you plenty of time to develop. It could be a couple of years before he needs to be kind of a massive contributor. But I think actually, as it stands, he could well be ready right now. I think his change of direction is fantastic. Closes really well with the ball in the air. He's got kind of elite stop-start ability to mirror receivers. I think that his long speed was a little bit of a question mark even before his injury. Obviously now that's even more of a question depending on how he can get back to kind of full speed and how quickly he can get back to full speed potentially. He can get a little bit eager with his hand use downfield. He's a physical guy at the line of scrimmage, physical at the catch point as well. And I worry that, again, if that speed maybe falls off, doesn't quite recover, could the kind of hand use downfield start to become a bit of a problem for him potentially? I hope not, obviously. I think, excellent physicality at the catch point. Watched his game against Alabama in particular in 2024. He was excellent for the most part, a few down plays, but he was up against a few good receivers there as well. Could be a great starter long term. I think he's definitely got about as high a ceiling as pretty much anyone in this class. He's almost violent in his use of hands at times, and he doesn't always bring that same physicality to the tackle. However, I think he's a fantastic talent, and his Again, versatile. He can kind of cover all bases, whether it's zone or man. And yeah, he's going to be a defensive coordinator's dream, I think, as long as the injury doesn't play too much of a factor and he gets that speed back up to to the level where it wouldn't be a problem, I would say.
So, Clint, what do you have on McCoy, and how do you slot him on your draft board without him playing?
Yeah, I've got McCoy corner 2 right now behind the guy we're going to talk about next. It's interesting when you look at him, in terms of just how much of that breakout year that he had last year. 3-star out of Texas, signed with Oregon State, 5 starts his first year, then jumps to Tennessee in the SEC, 13 starts, second team All SEC. In terms of just his best football being ahead of him, with the understanding that he's got this injury to work with. That's exciting about him. The body type is fantastic, very fluid, loves press. Ball skills are there. Like I had the number here. His 2 seasons starting. I mean, for him to be 12 pass breakups, 6 interceptions. I do think the short area quicks and the triggering downhill are better than the long speed. I think that's more adequate. And I liked Peter's point about when he can get nervous there in terms of his long speed and recovery. He can get a little grabby. Had him for 8 penalties last year. But I mean, we're talking about a guy that this many notes. He had 18 starts in college before this injury this year. Have to imagine he's not going to touch grass at this point. Why should he? Tennessee's going to be in the Music City Bowl or some shit. He very well could go corner 1 in this draft. I think Daylen will go first, if for no other reason, just the certainty of tape he had this year in the SEC. But if somebody were to tell me that he was their corner 1, betting on the upside, betting on the tape he had last year, it makes complete sense to me. I mean, I think, too, one of the things I liked in terms of using his size, 7% missed tackle rate in 2024, that's strong. That is strong. And I really like how he played false leverage, really in terms of baiting quarterbacks and really trusting his instincts. There's so much to work with. It's kind of like Peter said. Some defensive coordinators going to get giddy. When we look at the first round and teams that need some corners, I'm like, man, you'd have to really think hard to pass up on this guy or the one we're going to talk about next if you're Miami. You'd have to think real hard if you were Minnesota to pass up on this dude. You'd have to think – I can just keep going on a few of these that it's like, while the depth of the corner class is great, if you're somebody that's like, dude, I got nobody. Like, I got like Vegas Raiders corners, nobody. You take a bet on this guy because this guy can't be a corner 1 in the league.
So, Durst, Jermod McCoy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and Peter had brought up Will Johnson earlier, and I think there's a lot of parallels to that. Will Johnson was some people's or most people's CB1 the summer before his senior year or junior year, I mean. And so I don't think we're going to get the same fall. I think there is some more, like maybe there's some questions about Will Johnson's injuries as opposed to Draw McCoy, who's going to be like 15, 16 months. By the time he gets drafted, like it'll be like, his injury was like 16 months ago at that point. And by the time he actually starts, training camp, it'll be a whole year and a half. So I don't think we have the same like questions, but I think there's a lot of parallels to that. But I like to bring up something, which is that some of the best players in the NFL right now missed their final seasons of college. We're talking about, and again, a lot of this was COVID reasons, but we're talking about Jamar Chase. We're talking about Penei Sewell. We're talking about Micah Parsons. And even those that didn't miss the entire final season, you got the 2 Ohio State guys, Nick Bosa and JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, who missed a large, like majority of their final seasons in college. So I wouldn't say that him not playing is going to be a death knell to his draft stock. I still think there's a good chance that he's CB1. I think there's a good chance that he's a high, maybe even potentially top 10 pick. But again, again, we don't have access to all the medicals that the NFL teams are going to have. Now, beyond that, I mean, he is an elite boundary corner with prototypical blend in size, length, and athleticism. I feel he does a great job staying square and disciplined. Excellent ball skills. He's physical at the line of scrimmage and at the catch point. He's got the burst to recover and close distance when he's initially beaten. And he's an explosive vertical leaper to eliminate jump balls. There's a couple of plays there where he is in the air, swatting, or making interceptions. He plays the ball well from a trail position, which a lot of guys don't do. So a lot of people, can't play once they're already like a step behind the guy. And I think he's a good tackler. He should be 100% healthy by the time training camp starts. And I do feel like he also weaponizes his arm length really well. He can be behind the receiver and still get his arms out in front to meet the ball, kind of almost like wrap and reach there. But again, obviously there's some concerns there. He's got towards ACL, and of course January 2025. I do agree with Peter, who said that maybe there's some questionable long speed. He can be a little overcommitting when jamming occasionally. When he starts trying to do too much of a two-hand jam, I think Ryan Williams got him a couple of times where he's just so quick that if you try to two-hand jam Ryan Williams, that's probably not the best plan. And it can make it difficult to recover when you overcommit on some of those jams. So again, there was mostly good plays against Ryan Williams, but there's obviously a few plays there, and obviously we're talking about elite players when we're talking about Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith. But this is the kind of guy that he's going to have to play against if he's CB1 for some NFL teams. So it wasn't all. I think people kind of remembering him a little bit better than he was in 2024. Very, very good, but people I think expected some improvement. Instead, we got nothing on film. So again, I think he's, CB1 probably for me. I've got, even though I talked about Will Johnson, another comp I have for him is Derek Stingley, because he had injuries in his career as well. And I would say that Stingley's best film was not his final season. So that kind of, brings some parallel to what I think about McCoy.
Okay. And the last player we're going to cover is Mansoor Delane from LSU. Transferred to LSU from Virginia Tech. We liked Mansoor Delane when we covered him last year, and then he chose to go back to school. But Clint, what do you have on Mansoor Delane?
Yeah, it took a big jump for me in terms of last year to this year. Liked him out of Virginia Tech, got him as corner one right now, coming out of LSU. 29 starts at Virginia Tech. He'll stack onto that this year. He's going to be a 40-plus start guy in the ACC and the SEC. I think his change of direction, the fluidity, his ability to drive and close, trusting his instincts, identifying the quarterback's decision, identifying routes. He's got it. I mean, he's got first round there all day. I think he's a physical tackler. I mean, this guy's forced like 4 or 5 fumbles in his career. Tough ass. And it's not as much this year at LSU. I mean, they strictly had him as the corner one boundary. But I mean, if you look at the Virginia Tech film, he's all around the backfield in terms of versatility. Getting a little more specific, like I mentioned earlier, the Vikings. This dude is Brian Flores' dream, man. I would love to see him go to Minnesota, depending on where they fall in the draft. And I'd really, really like to see that as a fit I threw out there. In terms of a comp, I had Darqueze Dennard, formerly out of Michigan State, drafted, I believe, by the Bengals. Was a guy that I was super high on coming out of Michigan State. But in terms of the body habit, some of the play style, if I were to say anything in terms of cons, I think some of his catch point length, versus maybe you get a little more excited about McCoy there. And then just trying to undercut routes a little bit. But, I mean, I think this guy's a very aggressive player, but he's just such an eye tester. Like, I think Delane is the kind that if you were on field level and you were just watching this dude warm up, you'd be like, that's a first-round NFL corner. I think he's got all that to him. And like I said earlier with McCoy, if you told me this one was your 1 and that one was your 2 and vice versa, I'd be cool with it. But right now for me, and I am traditionally more, it's a little easier to lean on the fact that he does have tape this year if I had to decide between the two of them. But you're not going to go either way. But no, similar with McCoy, these two guys are going round 1.
Okay. Durst, Mansoor Delane from LSU. What do you think?
Yeah, well, you brought up Brian Flores, and also I'm like, what about Byron Murphy as a comp? That's like, that may not be so bad, especially if Mansoor Delane measures a little bit smaller than we think he's going to. But yeah, Mansoor Delane, Virginia Tech in 2022 to 2024. He for this year has got 9 pass breakups, 2 interceptions with 0 penalties, and 0 pass interferences. So that's really impressive. He was my 11th cornerback in summer scouting. And it only took 1 game to realize I had him way too low, because the game with Clemson and LSU, I'm like, this might be cornerback 1 for me. And it was like immediately obvious. So I wrote down he was consistently the best cornerback in college football this season. Now I'm not counting Leonard Moore and some of the the undraft guys on there, but scheme diverse, proven he can effectively play in press, soft press, or zone. I felt he had really good tackling efficiency. He's got a 10.6% career missed tackle percentage, and he's been playing for a while too. And he does a good job decelerating and then quickly gearing back up when the receiver is threatening vertically, and then he does like a dig or a breaking route. Now I'm not quite as high, it sounds like, as Clint is, despite everything I just said there. I do think he was the best cornerback in terms of college football, but he may not be the best NFL cornerback of this group. I have him as sort of could be between pick 20 and 40 or so. So I put Trent McDuffie in there as a potential comp. I put Roger McCreary as a potential comp, and I might be adding Byron Murphy in there. So some guys that are right around that fringe first round that I think have similar size. Now, all of these guys have played a decent amount in the slot. I do think Mansoor Delane's probably going to pass that threshold barely to be able to stay on the outside, if that's what NFL teams want from him. So I think he's probably going to settle around quarterback 2, 3 for me. Very excited about the player. Hope his measurables are not going to be a big dot to his final grade.
So Peter, what do you have on Mansoor Delane?
So I think it's funny that one of the first words that Clint mentioned was fluidity. I think he's got absolutely exceptional fluidity in his movement, whether it's kind of triggering downfield, whether it's a stop-start, switching between back pedal and then closing in the ball, kind of matching receivers, mirroring their movements is fantastic laterally as well. I think he reads the game very well. He's often kind of one step ahead of certainly the receivers, sometimes even the quarterbacks. I think that, again, another phrase that kind of comes to mind, we've had a lot of guys in this class that we've spoke of in the last few weeks who are very aggressive in terms of their tackling. They bring the physicality. However, I think that he certainly brings very controlled brand of that, his controlled physicality, and that kind of lends itself to his low missed tackle rate. And I think he's, again, as mentioned before, he's another guy who defensive coordinators will be able to kind of plug and play. I'm very interested to see what it looks like when he's, because he may even start out as a team's cornerback too, potentially, which would be wild and would be a great situation for any team to find themselves in. He's another one who I kind of did quite a bit of work on last year, and I thought he was very talented but inconsistent at that point. I think that potentially the only drawback at this point is that maybe you'll get a few size mismatches, like I say, in terms of the length of the catch point, or maybe kind of real elite top end speed. But again, that it feels like nitpicking. I think at this point, he's my cornerback 1. Again, even just I think that that'll pretty much be decided by McCoy's injury this year. That's my kind of cornerback 1 and 2, and for me, it definitely ends up with Delane being my cornerback 1 in this class, quite comfortably in the end.
So, as I was listening to all of you, And like, I didn't hear anybody saying Daylen or McCoy is a top 15 player. Right? Like, I heard back half of round one is where either of them would go.
I would speak up and say that I think after hearing us, I'm the highest on Daylen. I think, because it's funny, I kept saying Minnesota. I think that's creeping around 15. So you could even say that I'm like slap in the middle of round one. Yes, but I'll take claim to that. I think I'm a hair higher than the group.
I'd definitely say mid-round one, I think. Yeah, I think partly because I don't think that there are, kind of truly, full-on blue-chip cornerback prospects who've kind of got it all this season. So, I don't think there's a guy who's a top 5 prospect as a cornerback. I think that, a team might be tempted to take him at, in the top 10. It doesn't necessarily mean that I think he's a top 10 player in the class, but it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he went top 10.
And flipping the switch a little bit, that's kind of how I feel about McCoy. That it's he got the injury concerns. There's a little bit of parallels to Will Johnson, but there's also parallels to Derek Stingley, and so I need to catch up on some of the other prospects, but I could definitely see him being in my top 15, possibly in my top 10.
Okay.
Well, two teams that you could put if the draft were tomorrow, I think the conversation starts at 9 at the Rams. I think.
Yep.
I don't think they're being. I think Rams, then 11 Vikings, 12 Miami. It's like between those two guys, you're not getting past Miami at 12 without one of them being gone.
Well, and Clint, that's actually where my head was going. So I am looking at the draft order. So I have the Commanders at 8, the Rams at 9, Vikings at 11, and the Dolphins at 12. So all of those teams will have a Caleb Downs or cornerback or insert other position here discussion, right? So like Commanders at 8, Caleb Downs or Daylen, Caleb Downs or McCoy, right? Because the Commanders need a corner, but the other thing, like we're going to be doing corner big boards next week, and you can now, if you're the Commanders, you don't pick again until round 3. So if you are Washington and you think our defense is a corner away from competing for the division, you either have to trade back to accumulate more picks, or you need to get your corner in round 1, or you're going to do Daylen Everette in round 3. Right? Like if you need a corner, right? And then the Rams definitely need corner. The Vikings at 11, I understand that they need safety and corner as well as a few other things. And then the Dolphins have a slew of needs, but corner is at the top of the list. So that's why I was asking, like, could either Daylen or McCoy, in your eyes, go above pick 15? Because there's some teams like just outside the top 8 that need a corner. So, and Cleveland has 2 picks, and Cleveland also needs a corner. I don't see Cleveland going corner at 5th overall, but Cleveland, I believe, also needs a corner.
I think Cleveland's going to use that second pick to go up.
I would agree with you. Okay. Well, we could sit here and we could pontificate the draft order and landing spots for a while, but why don't we pause for podcaster identification? Clint, do you want to let everybody know about all of the other content that you make?
Yeah, you can really find anything and everything I do on Twitter at NFL Draftdome, or my name that's listed on there, Clint Goss. Majority draft coverage. I also do have some kind of specifics as far as the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah. So you can find all that there, but I'm incredibly active on Twitter, so that'd be the easiest place to do so.
Cool. Durst.
Yeah, as usual, you can find me on Twitter/X at Durst NFL Draft. Of course, always catch me on the Mrs. R Relevant Daily podcast, usually on Wednesdays. And we'll be talking, what about our top maybe 40 or so, or no, a top 150 guys, right? Like guys we think are going to be in the top 150 is going to be next week's episode. Cornerbacks that we think will make our top 150 list. Is that right?
That is correct.
All
Anybody
right.
anybody you have graded as a possible NFL starter, and we'll do the boards there. But Peter, let everybody know what you do.
Yeah, so likewise, best place to find any content I produce will be on Twitter at PeterQuinn1997. I write I'm a Seattle Seahawks writer for Join the Huddle UK, and any articles there or any podcast I'm on with these guys, the Mr. Relevant podcast, then you can find it there.
I want to take a moment and plug the Draft Professor Simulator. So the simulator is interactive, and what that means is that if Peter goes in and does a Seattle mock draft, and then Clint goes in and does an Atlanta mock draft on the Draft Professor Simulator, when I come in and do a Buffalo mock draft, there's a really good chance I'm going to see the players that Clint took go to the Falcons and the players that Peter took go to Seattle. So the users have control over who your team takes in a mock draft. That's especially true in rounds 3 through 7. So the way I've designed the algorithm, rounds 3 through 7, end users should have almost immediate control over who your team picks. Rounds 1 and 2, you might need to do 20 mock drafts to get your favorite players to go to the top. But if you are going to do 20 mock drafts, you are my kind of mock drafter. Thank you for being
Get in there, you sick bastards, and do 20.
Yes. So for Clint, Durst, Peter, myself, for the 110 people at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you on another podcast in about 50 minutes, everybody. Have a good night.